back to another Wildwoods Beekeeping Podcast. I appreciate everybody joining us tonight, and I appreciate Mike joining us tonight. And for our live stream tonight, we'll be having Mike Berry for our special guest. I appreciate him again for spending time with us tonight. So first, before we do get into some of the chats, I do have some topics, and we'll answer questions. So do feel free to type any questions that you have in the comment section. We will get to them later. So I wanted to go on and open up our chat tonight, and I just want to kind of, Mike, just to introduce himself to everybody, if there are some people who don't know him, and just kind of tell us a little bit kind of how you got into beekeeping, kind of what you are doing now.
Oh yeah, well, I'm Mike, and I do bees, right? That's my channel. Anyway, no, I started beekeeping. We're going about 13 years ago now, and we'll be going into the 14th season, I suppose. It's quick, man. It flew by. But yeah, I got into it. I had some childhood memories at one time about some bees and going in some bees. And when I was looking to pollinate my fruit trees out there after I retired from the Navy and planted a few, I said, bees would be good. And I started on one hive, mentor free. Wish I'd have had a mentor. And off it went from there. And as I worked and kept bees as a hobby, I decided I could start selling a little bit of honey, making a little money to pay for the hobby. And that's kind of where I'm at now. Is I keep about 40 to 50 during the peak of the season. I think I got about 40 out there now. And I just make honey right now to pay for the hobby and pay for all my fun toys I'm able to buy. I know people see a lot of my toys. It's not because I'm rich, and it's not because I make a whole lot of money. I promise you. It's just because I just keep the beekeeping operation all by itself and wrap the money right back around in it. And that's what I do. And of course, I make videos, that. And I enjoy making those videos. It's fun. I mean, it's stressful sometimes. We don't have content like this week, but I like it. And I've met a ton of people all the way from Canada and overseas down to as far south as Trinidad and everything else. So it's been a great experience.
Oh, yeah. And speaking of Canada, we have Ian from Canadian Beekeepers Blog. So, hey, Ian, thanks for checking in. Good to see you. We have a lot of folks in tonight. We already have 20 folks in here pretty fast. So thank you all for joining us tonight. We have Tennessee Tim. We have Brian from Flower Street Farm, and me again, Joey. I think he's from Louisiana too. Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah, and Russell Kootman, the Tar Heel Beekeeper. Keith Spillman from North Carolina. So a lot of folks in here tonight. Tim and Hannah from Gunline Bees. There's a lot of folks in here, so I wanted to just appreciate everybody for joining us tonight, spending time with us. So first, I guess we'll go on and talk a little bit, and like I said, if people have questions, feel free to ask them too. I just wanted to dive right into a topic I want to talk about, and I just kind of wanted to ask you I know you don't do any videos of how-to videos. I know you do a lot of how you do. So I just kind of wanted to ask you, how do you feed your bees? Do you feed bees? And if you do, kind of how do you do it, and kind of what's your preferred methods if you do?
I'll feed them any which way I can, depending on which is best. It's a case-by-case thing because I don't mass feed. I don't need to mass feed at the level that I produce bees and honey. What I do is I allow, and I'm not saying I wouldn't, I do feed when I have to. But, I always say this at our meetings. Everybody has their reasons to manage bees the way they do. And, I'm not a commercial beekeeper. I'm not raising queens. I'm not trying to build huge nests for the winter, things like that. So I don't need to feed with the abundant nectar source we have. If my hives are light, I will feed in the fall. I fed that one in the video recently because it was so light and he got robbed out. And I'll use anything from a hive top feeder to a bucket to a frame feeder. I've got every kind of feeder you can think of. And if I don't have it, Joey Rawls, he's got one I can borrow because he's got every other kind I don't have. So I'll feed in the spring if we miss a privet flow and my bees aren't growing fast enough for me to be ready to peak them into May. But that doesn't happen often. It's only happened really 2 years that I can think of in my whole total time where I've had to throw some sugar syrup on them to build them up and build them into their second deeps. But most of the time, we start seeing nectar down here in February, and we're splitting in March. And if I feed them, I'll have more bees in the trees than I'll have in the boxes. So I kind of feed as necessary. I got some plans for next year that may call for some heavy feeding, but for the most part, I really don't need to.
Yeah.
Even in the dearth, I leave enough honey out there. And I'm actually planning a video here this week where I'm gonna talk a little bit about feed going into fall and things and how I do it and why I don't do it and why I do it and when I do it. That's really it. I see the need in the commercial operations. I see the need when they're building up or they're selling bees or they're getting ready for almonds and they have to have their bees ready to go in January, But for me, at my level and what I do and my goals, I don't have to feed that much. So I don't invest a lot in sugar.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've done the same thing, over the years. I don't feed like a whole lot. I do feed in fall, but I really do only feed when I need to. I do have some I did put some food on the colony just in case, but I've just been doing that, kind of when I need to. That's kind
Right.
of how I do it. But I did feed a good bit in fall. I think the main reason why I really did have to feed a lot of this fall, I feed 1 gallon buckets. Is I did take a lot of honey this spring going into the dearth. So
Right.
during the dearth, it was I probably didn't need to take as much honey as I did, but I was able to feed them back what I took. So, but after that, everybody's heavy. I went in the colonies, right before, we got into this cold weather, and everything they're all full and heavy.
Well, you bring up a good point, Grayson, and that's when you take honey. I produce enough honey for what my customer base is. I know it pretty well. The point that I know what I need for honey, and so when I can afford to leave as much on as possible, I'll leave a whole second deep. So my bees will be all the way down in that bottom. I'll use a double deep configuration, and I'll just take all the mediums off the top of the doubles, and that top deep usually is full. If not full, then they'll bulk it out in the fall if we have a flow. But you bring up a good point. There are some beekeepers that may need more honey, and so they're going to take more. And sugar is way cheaper than honey, so you can feed them that back. And I agree 100% with how they do that. Just like feeding in the dearth, I know the guys want to have a lot of guys that want to have huge nests. I'm okay just because I'm a full-time job. Everything else, I don't need a gigantic nest as long as I don't have a drought. If I have a dearth, it's only a month and a half, so I'm okay with letting that nest just kind of shrink on down, bulk it back up a little bit in the fall, and I'm okay going into winter with small nests because down here, I don't have to have a huge cluster to get through the cold because our cold is so sporadic.
Yeah, that's one thing about especially down here. We don't have as harsh weather as some of the folks up north.
Oh yeah,
because those folks up there, like Ian and a lot of other folks, I'm sure, that are tuning in, they have to get big clusters in. They're not like us, where we
that's
can
right.
Survive with smaller clusters. Like most of my, hives aren't really the biggest clusters. But they are decent size, which is plenty enough for me to get through winter. So I'd have to say 4 frames, maybe around there, for 3.5.
They can make it with that.
They can.
I'll leave a 4-frame nuke out, no problem, because we have the weather. But you brought up another good point with like somebody like Ian. He's running singles and he's up in the cold. He has to have huge nests, but he also has to have that thing slammed full of feed. So it goes back to the whole management practice. What are our goals? What level are you at? What are you doing? So that's why feeding. I have a lecture I did at the North Carolina convention, and it was about being careful with YouTube because so many people see feeding and it's just automatic that they feed, and it's like, well, whoa, what are you doing? Why are you doing it this time of year? Do you know why you're doing it? It's a management tool, and everybody has their different goals, their different configurations, their different regions, and everything is so regionalized and so specific to the region that YouTube can really get some folks in trouble if all they're doing is hitting a checklist and going, well, I did that. Okay, I did right. Well, now your bees in March are up in the tree because you gave them 2 gallons of 1-to-1. They already had nectar coming in down here. Yeah. So,
yeah, absolutely. I've always said the same thing on my channels, not to take too much of that in, because there's a lot of these people watching northern folks who are really good beekeepers. I watch a lot of northern beekeepers, see what they do, but sometimes it's good just to find somebody in your local area to kind of that you can base off what they do. Maybe you can take some things that work for them that's in your area.
Right.
That's why I watch a lot of beekeepers around here, like Lisa. She's down there in the comments. Good to see you, Lisa. Grammy Midwives. Good to see you. And like Bruce, some folks there who are around here. I like to kind of watch and kind of see what they do, and that's what that's what I have always kind of advised people to do, is just kind of find somebody who might be in your local area to base off of, because sometimes whenever you're looking up north, it can be it could be you can get in this position where you're taking things up there that might not work for your area. So like
Absolutely.
anything that we do here, like if Ian watches one of my videos and takes everything I do, the colonies would not make it up there. So it's always different management practices, like you said.
Everybody has their own challenges,
right? Everybody does. It's because down here, I'm sure you probably have some of the similar things. Up north they do have more steady temperatures, but down here we have really fluctuating temperatures, which
that's right,
make warm weather. The bees don't have anything to go out and get, and then they start burning off food,
right?
Stuff like that.
Absolutely.
That's our challenges.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. The next topic, I just kind of, or not really a topic, I just kind of want to ask you, do you have any plans for next year? Kind of what are you planning to do next year? Kind of what you want to do?
I'm kind of holding that close to the hip right there, what I'm going to do, but I'm going to pretty much, as far as my honey production side, just keep it the same. I found a management strategy that worked for me about 3 years ago after going 10 years in and out, trying to figure different ways of splits and different times to split, different ways to get queens, different things to do. I've settled on a management strategy that allows me to have my queens laying in my new splits on April 1st. And that gives me a colony that's trying to peak during our privet flow, if we have one. And if we don't have one, where I may need to feed, I can peak them in May for the main flow. And it's worked really well. I've gotten great harvest, even when everybody was down 50% down here because of the late freeze we had. I still made a good harvest. It was 50% of what I normally would. So this past year we did about 4,000 pounds, and 2 years, 3,000 pounds ago, so it's staying pretty steady with this management strategy. The 4,000 was due to the big privet flow we had. So I was very happy. That's a record for me, but it's a strategy that's worked. So I'm going to stick with it. It's basically using queen cells to do my splits, whether I buy them or make them. I had to buy some years, and some years I got to make them, and they work out good. But as far as plans, it's all going to depend on whether I decide to, when I decide to retire and how big I want to grow things. And I don't ever want to be too big, because I do want to retire one day, but no specific plans just yet. When I do have them, I'm definitely going to do a video on them, and we'll go from there.
Oh yeah. I've done a video talking about things I'm planning on doing, but everything for me that I always say always changes. So that's why I try not to do things too specific on my videos. I just kind of say things that I know that can happen, that are really realistic to happen. And I really just, whenever I do plans and people ask me, I just kind of really like to try to just take it slow and not try to expand too fast. I just kind of want to slowly expand my apiary, not get too big where I won't be able to manage things the way I need to. Right now I have 6 colonies, which are really good colonies. They're strong. I'm thinking they're probably gonna get through winter nice and healthy, and then next year we'll kind of go from there and see kind of how everything goes, and
that's right,
try to expand a little bit.
Well, one thing I see, it's easy. It doesn't take a ton of skill when you first start. And this is me talking about me. It doesn't take a lot of skill to really grow fast if you want to, whether you're catching swarms and doing removals, or whether you're splitting bees like crazy and learn that I can take a 10 frame fat full box of bees and split it 4 or 5 ways, and I can really make bees in a year. I think the problem is people don't do exactly what you said and plan it out and figure out exactly what their plan is with it. They realize they can grow fast and they can make a little bit of money here and there, but before they know it, they're overwhelmed. That happened to me. Not overwhelmed. I was working a full-time job. I was handling it, but I was up to 40 or 50 hives years back. Well, I had a serious job where I wasn't getting time off at all. And I realized it was too much. I think it's easy to get caught up in that growth spurt when you're newer. Now, some guys do it great, but those guys that succeed, I think of newer beekeepers that expand very fast with the mindset of going commercial. I think of Nathan at Duck River. I think of Ashby Miller in North Carolina, those guys. But the difference with them is they studied it out. They figured out what they wanted to do, and they planned it carefully. Some of us, as we're growing, we just decide to grow real big, and I think it can get away from you. And it's not a calculated business plan, if that's how you want to put it. So I think you're right. You grow slow and easy, find out what's comfortable for you, and that's why I say next year it's all up in the air, because as much as I'd love to grow and not a lot, so I'd like to double what I got and kind of do that full time in retirement if I could. I got to make sure that's what I want to do, make sure that's my body's ready for that. It's a lot of work. And I think it's real easy to get caught up in the euphoria of beekeeping and run wild. The next thing you know, you just can't handle it. You're burned out and you don't enjoy it. And that's the key at our level. When it's not our livelihood, I think we got to be careful of burning ourselves out really quick and not enjoying it,
Yeah. That's what I enjoy it. That's one thing that I try to do, is to enjoy my, time being a keeping bees and not get overwhelmed with it. That's, agree with you there, and try to take it slow and learn what I, need to do to keep growing. Of course, I don't want to, I'll eventually get up to some higher levels, to some more bees, and maybe one day be a sideline beekeeper, but I'm not quite there yet. I need to just continue doing what I do now and keep beekeeping fun, like Keith down there said. Yep. The next topic I wanted to quickly talk about, I just kind of wanted to ask you. I think we talked a little bit about it earlier, about hive configurations and things, and I know a lot of people have their opinions. I just kind of wanted to ask you simply, kind of, what configurations do you run, and kind of, why you like them in your area, of course.
Oh man, I do double deeps, and not because I enjoy double deeps. I would love to run singles, but singles are a challenge this far south. They're a challenge because of the growth that we have for so long. We grow so long, and that's no problem. We could grow it up into a double and then drop them back down into the bottom deep. And so if I do that, I drop them back down. Now I've got my queen in my brood chamber down there, and I start backfilling with honey. That would take me, first of all, I couldn't even drop her down until probably mid-April. Well, we've already been running some moderate nectar in since March. I'd have to drop her back down, get her down there. I'd backfill that deep, no problem. I'd have all that honey. I would then have to find a place to store, 50 deep brood boxes to keep the moths out of them. That's a challenge in and of itself, without fumigating a container. That's what the commercial guys have to do. That would be tough. Feeding them back up, of course, feed would be involved at that point. You have to feed a single going into winter, even down here. But then you got those things that are still growing up through November. Then they finally shut down in November, and we're starting to grow back in January. So singles for me would be a tough thing, but that's what I'd love to run. I've studied every which way, and down here it would be too tough. So I stuck with double deeps. And it kind of makes it good because I have room in the spring for the bees to expand. And then I just split them all off. And I go right back into doubles from that point. I run some singles now and again with the queen excluder. If my queen is just starting to peak in that single deep and grow out of it around the flow, then I'll run a single with mediums on top for supers. But that's mine. I like double deeps. It's easier when you don't have a lot of time. It's more forgiving. That's my take. That's my opinion on it. For me down here, what I do.
Oh, yeah. The next topic, and I do want to mention before I do talk, we get into the next topic. Feel free to ask questions, folks. If you have any questions, we will get to those after we talk about some more topics. That's what I've been trying to do. Is, get some questions in, and we'll answer them a little later. I think in one of your videos, I can't remember. Which one? I think you were treating with oxalic acid. I think if that's correct. I can't really remember. I was watching some of your videos. I think you're showing something about oxalic acid, if I can remember correctly. But I just kind of want to ask you kind of what you treated, in fall, kind of if you treat for fall, and kind of some things that you do, and what you do with treating.
I used to just run oxalic acid after the honey flow and do like 5 or 6 treatments every 5 or 6 days. And I remember listening to a study in North Carolina. What's his name from NC State? I forget his name now. Doggone it, David. I forget his last name. But anyway, the guy that runs the bee lab down there. And anyway, he said it takes about 9 rounds to really get anywhere ahead of the mites in order to knock them all the way back. So I guess I was knocking them back pretty well. I always stayed away from the chemical strips at first, because I'd always heard every time I turned around as I was coming up in the bees, I was seeing these mites getting resistant. They were resisting these, getting resistant, whatever you call it. I can't speak tonight, but kind of under the weather, by the way. But anyway, they were getting resistant to these strips. And so I said, well, I'm going to shoot for oxalic acid. And I started using that actually way before it was legalized in the States. I had an old wand I bought from a guy that was homemade, and it worked. But then I got to where, when you do that and you're working every day and you're trying to do this every 5 days, that means you're doing it after work. It's hot in August. It's brutal down here. It's between 95 and 100 and humid. You know how that is. I said, it's too much. So I started using Apogard. I experimented with Hopcard. That stuff was terrible as far as a mess. It knocked them back, but you would have had to use so much that it would have been a lot of work, very messy. The bees hate it, and it would have cost a ton. And what I ended up settling on was Apogard. So what I do now, last couple of years, I just throw Apogard right behind my honey flow. And then I'm going to go back in December with oxalic acid. Although this year, kind of like what Ian saw that time when he went in and all of a sudden he had all these mites. I had a high mite count, and I said, we got to do something about this. So I went right back in September and hit everybody 4 times with oxalic acid vapor. I want to go to spring with some oxalic acid extended release and try and keep my Apogard for the summer. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see how the Varoxan goes. Listen to Greg up in North Carolina at the conference talk about that and the trials they had with their pads and their trials are going to have with these strips. So we'll see how that goes. But I like the more natural organic compounds at this point, and that's what I'm trying to treat with.
Yeah, I've this year I used Apogard. I guess that's Famous, right? And it worked pretty good for me this year. But I've usually used like Apivar. I think most people down here I've known use Apivar. I used it last year. I just kind of want to try to change things up a little bit. I've been thinking about trying to get some oxalic acid and try that out as well. I'm sure it probably work same as some others that I've used. Probably work pretty good. I just never got around to researching, and I've researched a little bit about it on YouTube or online or whatever and see kind of about it, but I just never got around to getting it or trying it out or anything. So eventually I'm going to try it out and get some and see how it'll work and kind of test it out and do some tests afterwards and see how it does with my bees. But for now, I've just been treating with Apogard and Apivar. It's been working pretty good for the time being.
Apivar is a good one, and it's worked well, and it's not bad on the wax, and it can be used at many temperatures. That's what made it so great. Finding that the mites are becoming resistant to it's a problem. Dr. Frank Rankovich talks a lot about it. He spoke to us about it at our meeting, and the good thing about it's amitraz. The good thing about amitraz resistance is, unlike some of the fluvalinate and things that they used to use, fluvalinate, once they became resistant to that, they have stayed resistant to that. There's nothing they just stay resistant. Yeah. Apivar or amitraz, what's nice about that, what they're finding is if you take them off of that for a year, they'll actually lose their resistance, the mites will, to it later on to an extent. And they're finding that's kind of working too, but they are starting to see a lot more resistance to the amitraz. And so that was my thing, is I was just although I hadn't used it, I was afraid of spending all that money. It's a money thing and a time thing for me, and I got to balance that with work.
Yeah.
And so that to me is where I got to go, okay, how much am I spending? So ApiGuard came in cheaper, and I did counts afterward, had good counts here at the home yard. But when I got into town, I had these out of 3, I had 2 of them. One had 40 plus, one had 20 plus, and one had, 6 or 7. Well, that was enough to freak me out and start vaporizing every single hive every 5 days. I did it 4 times. So you just got to find what works for everybody, the way I see it. That's how I did it. And outside of my one disaster with the 2 mixing treatments, I think it went well. We'll see. We'll know in spring.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the reason why I did ApiGuard this year, because I was trying to mix up some of the things. I would like to try to do one other treatment, so I can kind of rotate some of my treatments and try to kind of hold back a little bit on ApiGuard. So maybe I can, like you said, maybe a year or so can put it back on, and maybe they'll lose some resistance to that. But that's one big reason why I really didn't treat it this year, because I was kind of nervous that it would start, these mites would start getting resistant. So I had to change it up this year, and I used ApiGuard once before I used it this year, and I really I think it worked fine that time. I just didn't really try
It's
hard
just
on doing it.
it's very heat. It's very
Yeah.
dependent on the weather. And so what Greg Rogers was saying in North Carolina, they found that they were doing 35 milliliters 3 times instead of half doses 4 times, and they were getting great results. And what he said was they found that 3 treatments equally spaced throughout a year, not of ApiGuard, but of different treatments, spaced 3 times throughout the year, were getting about a 92% rate on kill, and the opposite as far as survivability with the bees, which that's pretty good. So you got to switch them up. But for us down here, that ApiGuard, the 35 3 times worked great for mine. The full doses down here in this heat, 51, you probably run them out, because your goal is to get 100 grams on it in the end. In the end of the treatment, 100 grams is what you want of ApiGuard. But it's just so hard in the summer. So that 35 worked good, and I think I'm gonna stick with that next year. And I don't want, like you say, I want to rotate them around. I don't want to do ApiGuard all the time. I want to go with OAE or OAV, and then do the OAE in the spring, and and then maybe even rotate those around to something different. I don't know. We'll see what comes out. We'll see where we're at, especially when this new Mite gets here.
Absolutely. I see Bruce in there. I was just mentioning Bruce there. He says, "Hey y'all, driving and listening. Thanks Bruce for checking in. Good to see you." A lot of other folks in here. We have 32 people in here. A lot of folks in here. It's kind of early, only 28 minutes in, and unbelievable how sometimes fast these live streams, go. I've always mentioned that to all my viewers. Sometimes how fast these things will go whenever I do them, but sometimes lose track of comments as well. The next question I will ask, and a lot of people ask me this question. I actually got this question. It was either the last live stream or the live stream before that. It was, what was my favorite thing was in my work and my least favorite thing in beekeeping. So I was just gonna ask you, what's your favorite thing in beekeeping? Should I say about beekeeping?
I think my favorite thing is it. Well, it depends how successful I'm at certain things, but I just love the propagation of the bees. To me, the Lord allows us to propagate these bees and manipulate these bees, and to be able to do that to me is incredible. Just to watch them split and grow, and even if you're not requeening, like I'll requeen with queen cells a lot, even that is just so fascinating. So I just enjoy that. Man, the springtime, and that's when you're all back high on the bees, come out of a winter season, but maybe that's a little bit of it, but I like that part of it, just the production and the propagation of the bees. I think the least thing I hate the most about everything, putting introducers in, period. I hate putting them things in. But
oh yeah, I will say that's one thing sometimes can be pretty hard. Not really hard to do, but it's just sometimes can be a nuisance. And I put them in too because I don't want one thing I will say, whenever I left one of my colonies wide open, without, the entrance reducer, because, I guess I didn't get in time enough to do it. I didn't even think about putting an entrance reducer on. And, it was wide open. And I came back one day and the colony's robbed out. So I guess even if it was on, if it would have made a difference, it probably could have. But that was something that I was like, man, I should have put one of those entrance reducers on, because it might have made a difference. But at the same time,
Right.
could who knows? It's, I think. But the thing is, whenever this happened was really in really bad dearth. It was in 2023, whenever we had a really bad year. I think a lot of people down south probably had a bad year. I don't know about you, but down here we didn't. That we had a cold snap in like March or April, sometime around there, and it killed pretty much everything. So then we had beetles, robbing going on, and
Mm-hmm.
the dearth time. It was really terrible. A lot of bees absconding because of the beetles. I think I will say what I answered with whenever the guy asked me. And I was actually asked me, and my guest on, whenever I had him on, was the one thing I really hate about the whole thing is really the beetles, because those things get on my nerves so bad. It's just unbelievable how they they really do really bad down here sometimes. This year has not been as bad as a year, but 2023, last year was just terrible.
So interesting thing about the beetles. I saw your video the other day, and I saw a comment. I saw that comment about the fella made with the sun, and he also made about the bees moving up and down.
Yeah.
I didn't answer it because I started getting in depth, and I was like, I'm not getting in depth on this comment. But the beetles. So Jamie Ellis did a study at University of Florida that found that he couldn't find any difference whether they put them in the sun or in the shade. Now, Florida's got a sandy soil everywhere, even in the sun and the shade. They don't pack out in their grass pastures. I'm from there. So where he's at, I'm from right there. And so he didn't see a difference, sunlight versus shade. Well, why would you? Because outside of the heat on the hive, you wouldn't see that much, right? So I said, okay. That makes sense. Okay, I suppose, but I'm seeing a difference in the sunlight. I do see a difference in certain areas in the sunlight. But then I got to thinking, I'm just Joey there. I talked to him one time about it. I said, if you go back to the basics, I always go back to the basics. If you can't tie something back to the very basics, be careful. And the basic study of hive beetles tells you that it's a soil content as far as reproduction. And that's a lot of the problem is when you have your hives in the shade, they talk about more moist, darker soil. Well, down here, if you get out in the sun, it's like concrete when there hasn't been any rain. Even after rain, it's like concrete. Well, that goes back to the basics where it talks about beetle problems. If and when you're having them is usually due to a shadier, darker, more moist soil. And so I was like, okay, the basics tell me that if I'm out there in that sun, the reason I'm probably not seeing them is I'm sitting on some rock hard soil that where they're not really prominent. Now, will they fly out there? Sure. I've seen them out in sun hives in the sun. Like you said, they're out there, but I see them more in the shade where I'm at. Well, that's because my soil is like a rock out there in the sun, and most of mine are in the shade. So I was like, you got a point. You had a good point there, because what you said agrees with what Jamie Ellis said. He just didn't see the difference across the board, is what he said. And I thought that was interesting. That's what made me think of the soil part of it.
Yeah.
So.
Oh yeah, it can definitely go, both ways, of course. And I actually saw that study too. And I was actually thinking about that after that video, I made. I was kind of going through it, and I saw where, overall it might not, make a huge difference, but then again, you have sun in some areas, and it can make the soil harder. That can make, a little difference, too, as well. So
when you read about them, that's what they talk about. They talk about soil condition is the problem where you find the beetles.
Yeah.
So That may have been what you saw when you may have had a softer soil out there
Yeah.
where you put them in the sun. Didn't make a world of difference to you. You still dealing with beetles, you
Yeah.
know? So that's why we go back to it's regional. Don't tell me carte blanche across the board that this is where you put them and you won't have those problems. When somebody says it's not, when people start telling you absolutes in beekeeping, outside of things like if you pull a queen, they're going to make queen cells, things like that. When you start telling me absolutes, I kind of start tuning you down now. Telling me what worked for you is different. But when you start telling me an absolute that is one thing is right and one thing is wrong, I start tuning you down just a little bit, because then I start going, wait a minute.
Yeah.
We got to watch. It's regional, you know?
Oh yeah, definitely. I think one thing for me and I know a lot of folks who watch TV are from way different locations. I know a lot of people have different regions, and
Mm-hmm.
and for me down here, I guess it probably could have been that the soil was still moist. And one thing
Right.
is, we get a lot of rain down here. So in that same year when we had those beetles, we had a lot of storms coming in that DERF, really bad ones too, like 80 miles per hour winds, so much rain, and it kept on flooding sometimes down there. So I think that right there made a big difference in where I was setting my colonies out. That is, in the sun. So I agree with you there.
Yeah, I think Russell had asked a question about me growing if I retired. I think I kind of, he may not have been on when I said that, but yeah,
Let's
Russell.
see. We'll go on and answer a couple questions here. Feel free to ask some questions. Here's the question. Russell Kootman, he says,
Yeah.
Mike, when and if you retire from your day job, will you expand or cut back?
Depends how much time I spend up there with you in Minnesota, Russell. But if I'm able to retire the early retirement years, I really do want to grow some, and not exponentially crazy, big, huge. I just want to grow some to make a little bit of a better side hustle and pay for my retirement. That's kind of what I want to do. Then as I get into real retirement, 10 years down the road, I'll cut back. I might have about 6 apimays sitting in the back, or maybe some horizontals, or maybe both, just to come back to and visit when I'm in town. That's really the whole gist of it.
Yeah. Let's see. Richard says, don't quit your day job.
And why would that be? I'd like to know what's behind that.
Let's see. Flower Street Farm, Brian, he says, Mike, how do you produce your comb honey?
Okay, I learned this from a fellow that taught my friend, a 50-year beekeeper. He taught my buddy. I take a shallow box and I take shallow frames, and I do use the thin surplus foundation, Brian, that you can buy. Oh, Richard said it's a joke. Just making sure, man. I thought he was calling me a bad beekeeper. But no, I take that thin surplus and I put it in that frame, and I melt a little bit of wax, kind of like Gus Mitchell did with his. But I had started doing that, melting a little wax. It holds the sheet in very, very straight. And I picked the strongest hive, and he put it on there about a week before the main flow is hitting. And I put that box on there, and I put 10 frames in it. And if it's a good flow and a good colony, they usually produce a beautiful box. And I can usually make anywhere from 35 to 40 squares. And that's a $700 box of honey versus a liquid box, which fetches me about 300 or 250. So that's how I make mine.
Yeah. The next question is from Jason at the Egan Homestead Apiary, and he says,
Hey, Jason.
Mike, I was devastated with the video of the tree that fell on your beehive, and I think that video was the same time whenever we had some of those bad storms, if I believe, in 2023. I can't exactly remember. But he says, how is that colony doing?
Outside of being probably the meanest colony I have out here, it exploded. That little swarm, I caught a little swarm underneath a hive stand next door at the yard next door. And I was on my way somewhere. I forget where I was going. I think I was going to meet with my men's group at church or something. So I had my easy vac. I sucked them up, or my everything vac. I sucked them up. I threw them in a box and took off. And when that thing fell, I got it all kind of put back together. And I put that little queen on there, and she went to laying. They accepted her, and they absolutely exploded. I mean, that thing was so huge. It was, excuse me, it was wall to wall brood in the bottom, 6 brood frames in the top. And at this point in time, it's still doing good, and it's still mean. I don't know why it's mean. She was mean. But yeah, they're doing good. I'm gonna move them and all my little stray colonies that are sitting out in the yard. I'm getting ready to move them to a new yard that I got coming up, and we'll get them settled in.
Keeps filming, and he just kind of goes off from what the other question. He says, "Mike, good plan. Beekeeping is a good side hustle for retirement."
I want to be like Keith. That's me. I watch his videos and I watch his shorts all the time. I want to be like Keith.
Yeah. The Tar Heel Beekeeper just asked another question. He asked, "Mike, how long before you gonna retire?"
I'm praying about that, my friend. Randy, I don't know. I wanted to be this month, but right now it's just I want to get a few more things paid off. I'm hoping soon. Like when I say soon, I'm hoping. I hope my boss ain't watching. I'm hoping in the next couple months. I hope. I don't know.
Yeah.
Or soon though. I want to retire soon.
Yeah. The next question is from Jason at the Egon Homestead again, and he says, "Do you feel like you could catch a swarm with queen bee worth saving, or do you automatically just release swarms? Requeen swarms, excuse me." I guess you kind of just answered that question.
Yeah, that's right. I don't, and that's it. Like in the state of Florida, they're required to requeen a swarm just because they're protected from Africanized bees. But I never requeen a swarm. I let them go because their swarms. If you catch them in March down here, they'll make 2 boxes of honey for you. You catch them any later, they usually don't unless they're really superstars, but they will maintain a colony for you. And so what I do with a swarm, I have a log, and when I catch a swarm, I write where I caught it and what station in my yard it went, and so I keep track of that queen. And what she becomes now is a queen that is kind of a utility queen. So if I need a queen just to get a colony through winter, I can combine them with that. Sort of like that tree. I needed a queen. I had a swarm queen. They're good for that. And I track where they go. So I know how, I know that they're already an older queen. They may be 3 years old. They may be 1 year old. They may be 2. So I don't necessarily automatically requeen them because you might get a good one that'll keep you going for a year and a half just to hold something over. They're almost like for me, try to see if I can grow them into a honey crop. And if I can't, they're just like a utility queen for me. Somebody needs a queen. Hey, I got a queen from a swarm. Come get her, And that's kind of how I treat them. Now, when I was new, of course, I kept them for as long as they live.
Yeah, definitely. Let's see. I think we just had a Tar Heel. Randy says, "I'm hoping to in the next year to year and a half."
Yeah, and what I want to do also when I retire is I want to go see folks like Randy and visit your yard. I want to come over and see you and visit your yard. I want to go up north. I want to see Russell and these guys. I want to go, and there's more to name, but because I travel through these areas and I want to stop and spend a couple of days in the bee yards with all y'all and do videos and things like that. Just make it fun and do that in between seasons.
Oh yeah, I'm sure that'd be fun for a lot of beekeepers and see kind of how other beekeepers' yards are, for sure. There's Lee from Kodiak Farms. I think he's from Louisiana. I can't remember where everybody's from. I apologize if I get somebody's location wrong, but sometimes hard to remember. But good to see you, Lee. Thanks for checking in.
Oh yeah, Keith said he's gonna take me for a ride in Bertha. You darn right. I done told him I was coming up there and riding that thing. I will be up, Lord willing, and I'm still going. I'm coming up there to get in that thing and ride. And hey, Todd, I'm going there too. Trust me. I want to go out there with a commercial beekeeper for the almond pollination and help them unload and feed up and get ready to go and grade and do all that, and then go visit some beekeepers over there. I'm all about it.
Gunlawn Bees, Tim and Hannah, thanks for checking in. And they asked, Mike Berry, is there a certain genetic you're looking at for retirement bees?
Yeah, gentle. No, I'm gonna try and string, like right now the cells I buy are pretty much pure Italians. I do want to streamline into a variety. I'm not particularly sure which one. I want to get some from Greg up in Ohio. I'm not too concerned with bees from this area necessarily either. But in the end, I want to get a line. We got some coming from the USDA Bee Lab. They're going to help us with that program. And, Kent Williams in Louisiana, he's already got some from them and some of Corey Stevens bees and things like that. So I do want to experiment with a few lines. and say I get some from the USDA Bee Lab and she's looking good, I want to use her as my breeder queen and graft my own eventually. So I'm just looking, I would like VSH, but VSH, there's so much more to it, especially when you sit and listen to the USDA Bee Lab and you talk with them for an hour or two and you understand how long those genetics last, when in one generation they're gone if you don't keep them going. What has to be done? They've got to be monitored. They got to be purged. I just want the genetic along with maybe some organic compounds like thymol and oxalic acid and kind of converge on the queens like that. That's kind of not to try and necessarily go treatment free, which I'd love to be. Who wouldn't want to be treatment free? And I applaud those that are able to do it and are able to do what they do with it. But that would be VSH mixed in with a great producer. I'm not necessarily that deep into the varieties though, just as long as I can get something gentle that produces and try and keep the VSH genetic throughout the yard as best I can via my own breeder queens. And I'll buy the breeder queens. That's no problem. A couple $100 for a couple years worth of breeder. I'm good with that.
Yeah. The next question is from Jason again, and he asks, Mike, do you prefer to use mini mating nukes or do you prefer cells?
Okay, just cells. Because what I do is I have to split middle March. And so I got to get cells from a commercial guy right now. And I produced my own 1 year, and then 1 year they were flat failure if you watch my video. And we're trying to blame that on the yellow jasmine, but now I'm starting to think it might have been older larvae. But nonetheless, I want cells, and how I do it is I make all my splits. The next day I go back into all my splits with cells. And then when I make nukes that I sell excesses, like I pull brood so I can keep, because our swarm season goes from 1st of March all the way through May. We're fighting swarms because we haven't hit our main flow yet. So I'm constantly pulling brood and making nukes, and I make those nukes and put those cells in there. And while those are mating nukes, I sell those. So I don't really run a separate mating nuke and then move a mated queen, if that's what you're asking. I run the cell right on into the splits and right on into the nukes, and then sell the nukes and grow the splits. That's how I've done that. That management plan allows me to put cells in the middle of March. 2 weeks later, I've got queens. Before, I was splitting in March, letting them make their own queen. I was hoping to have a queen by middle of April. Well, then that half of the split never produced because by mid-May, their workforce wasn't built up to get me a honey crop. So that went by the wayside.
Yeah. Loma Vista Bee Company, he says, Mike, get some carnies. They are easy on winter stores compared to Italians.
And I've heard that, Todd. Also, another bee that's like that is the Russians. And there's some Russian breeders around here. Russians are very, very good honey managers and honey misers. I think people think they swarm so much because they don't realize that they don't collect honey first right off the bat like the Italians. And you're right, those Italians, they just gorge themselves. But the Russians are a lot like the carnies. So yeah, I'm looking at the carnies and the Russians as far as if I were to pick one that managed the honey the best. But the thing with the Russians is when they find the flow they're ready for and they're ready to grow, they grow so fast. They hit it so hard and they go so fast, and then they grow so fast. And you better be on top of them bad boys or them bad girls or there. You got bees in the trees. That's what I found anyway because I had Russians. I got my Russians from Dr. John Harbaugh, a VSH Russian. So
absolutely, right now I have Italians too. They right whenever going into spring this year, there were nukes, and then they just exploded into 10 frame boxes so quick, and like it was only like maybe 2 weeks. No, it was more like a month after I got them. They immediately started making swarm cells and started swarming on me. One of them got away from me, or should I say, 2 of them actually got away from me, and I was able to get back both of them somehow. And the other one, the other 2 that didn't leave on me, I was able to split them in time. So
I seen you do that.
Yeah, I made a couple videos on me doing that, and those bees just swarmed. Like I think like 4 of them, try to swarm. It was pretty unbelievable.
The Italians are good bees. I mean, every bee's managed a little bit different, but they're good bees. They make a lot of honey for you, and they're gentle most of the time. So.
Absolutely. And I guess I'll the next topic. If people want to put a couple more questions in, we'll take them in. We got 10 more minutes in, and then we'll kind of start closing things out. Time goes by pretty quickly when we do these things. Um, I think we were talking a little bit, about swarms and stuff just recently. And I know a lot of people, and I think, you like to set out traps, if I'm not mistaken. So I was just going to ask you, kind of if you like to catch, swarms, and if you do, kind of how you do it.
I love to catch them, but I'm bad about picking them up these days because I'm so
Yeah.
busy and I put them so far away. But I love to do it. And so what I do is I've got a few of those big tall traps. I use those, but I found a medium and a deep works good. And I got a little portable stand I hang on a tree. And then I've got a couple that I made at 40 liters they're basically 8-frame boxes, 12 inches deep. And I usually put in, now this is what I've learned and by reading and such, is they like a lot of empty and dark box space. They want that 40 liters. So I put in a lot of empty frames with starter strips. Okay. So I take some of that wired wax I got and I cut it. And then, okay, I'm not up on this. I have Swarm Commander because I bought it one year. And then Bob gave me some Swarm Rustler and it works. But for years, all I use is lemongrass. And so I put in, say for the 8-frame box, I'll put in, say, 7 frames with starter strips in the front. I'll put in 1 frame that's an old brood comb, and then I'll put in 1 foundation in the back. The 5-frame ones, same kind of similar. Basically 70% empty frames, a frame brood, and maybe a foundation. I put lemongrass oil on a paper towel, shove it in a Ziploc bag, and I just kind of zip it halfway. And I take that, before I put it at paper towel in there, I rub some on the entrance. Then I put that paper towel in there, zip it halfway, and I throw it in the bottom. I've caught swarms left and right. So then I tried the Swarm Commander and the Swarm Rustler, and I really didn't see a huge difference. I mean, they all work. They work good. The difference with the Swarm Commander and the Swarm Rustler is they're convenient because they're in a spray bottle. So when you go to rebait, you squirt. When I rebait now, I have to take it down. And I put about 10 drops of lemongrass on that paper towel when I do it. When I refresh it, I only put about 4 drops on there. I refresh it every 2 weeks. And they catch good. I'm always looking for somewhere near water, somewhere I know bees have been, and I always go back to where I've gotten good queens. And so when I'm near water, I put it on a tree line, or I put it out in like a clump of trees in the middle of an open area. That's what I'm always looking for. And I do try the whole southeast or south or east facing entrance. I do try that. So, and it works. It works good for me.
Yeah. I do have some swarm lure. Bob sent me some too as well. And I tried it out. I never got any bees to come to the boxes, unfortunately. I put them up high in the tree down at a different spot I had, and unfortunately I didn't get any luck. I might try to do some more of that next year. I put some drawn comb in there to try to maybe get them to come in, but maybe next year we'll have a little more luck.
Yeah, it wouldn't, and it wouldn't have been his lure, because his lure, he makes good lure. Bob makes a good lure. Nothing wrong with it. It works. I've tried with just the lure, just the lemongrass, but I've always done lemongrass. You can't go wrong with it. But if you got the lure, that's gonna work too. And give me a ring one day. We'll talk about it and see if we can set you up with a good spot, because I'm yet to be skunked, and but one time, and I don't know.
Yeah. Richard says, have you all sent your honey labels to Mr. Ed for his honeycomb wall? He's talking to everybody else in the comment section there. Let's see. Well, if you guys have any more, it looks like Mike's muted. You're muted, Mike. You're gonna have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I'm a mute in and out because my headphones went dead, so I'm a mute while you're talking. And that
Oh, okay. I get you. Let's see here. Y'all feel free to ask some more questions in the comment section to so we'll answer a couple more here soon. We're gonna end off. I do want to appreciate everybody joining us tonight. It's been a fun night. Good fun chat. I really appreciate everybody joining. And see you, Lee. Thanks for checking in. I appreciate you. Let's see. I need to make sure I didn't miss any types of comments. Any comments? No more comments there. There we go. But down here, it's been, been pretty getting a little more cooler. Let's see. There we go. We got Joey. When Mike returns, is he going to travel before growing his beekeeping?
Joey knows the answer to that. I'm going to travel in between beekeeping. The old retired inspector down here inspired me, and he has 100 hives or so sitting away from his place out on some property. And he goes out there and he makes all his splits. Then he took off for 2 weeks to Appalachian Trail and came back and checked his queens. Once his queens were all good, he took off and went down to Grand Island, went fishing. I said, you know what? Now that's the retired life for me. So I think I can grow and travel at the same time. So, but what, you're asking me all these questions, Grayson. What's your plans? What's your management strategy? And what are you planning on doing for next year? Why don't you tell us? Because we can figure out what you're up to.
Yeah. Well, next year, and some things that I've been doing, I've been doing some videos and talking a little bit about it, like we mentioned earlier. Right now, kind of start off here. I'm still feeding a little bit, trying to keep these healthy. Of course, I already got done pretty much feeding in fall. No more sugar syrup or anything like that. I'm just kind of feeding some sugar bricks, candy bars, or however you want to call it. I've been really feeding my smallest colony some sugar bricks. They've been it's a really small colony, and it's just very, very light. So I had to put some feed on them because they are pretty light. So that's kind of what I'm doing now. Just not much things going on right now that we're doing, but for next year I'm really going to be looking to expanding, try to build my apiary up a little bit. I'm thinking around 10 colonies, 11, 12, 15, somewhere around there. It's kind of my ideal idea of kind of where I want to be at. That's kind of that. Maybe try to catch some swarms if I'm able to, and if I'm in the position, I'll do some other things as well. Get some more honey. But right now I'm selling some honey as well. So that's pretty much the big things I'm doing now, is just kind of making sure bees have feed, make sure they don't starve, and selling some of my honey from last year. That's kind of what I'm doing now.
I got you. Just curious. I know you were, I see your hives, I see what you're doing, but I was just like, what are you planning on, what are you planning on doing? I know your goal is, earlier you said something like trying to, work your way up to a sideline of, beekeeping, but, depending on how you're doing it, that might be full time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Slowly but surely, going to try to get up there and get up to a sideline or somewhere around there, and who knows from there, we can get pretty strong, and bees will things will go fast. That's for sure. While it's already been a while now, we do have one more question from Brian Lee. Then I'll go on and exit ourselves out here. Brian Lee, he says, Mike, how many hives do you plan to have when you retire?
I don't ever plan to have more than 100, just because I do, I want to always enjoy it. And for what I think I want to do as a side hustle with honey production and possibly some sales here and there, 100 would do me just fine. Maybe even 70. That would be a good number, I'd say. No reason for me to get any bigger. I'm getting older. It's getting just as it's not getting easier every year to start doing all this lifting and running. But I think if I also don't have a full-time job, that could really help me with time management a lot better. So yeah, no more than 100.
I get you. Well, I guess we'll go on and exit ourselves out here. I appreciate everybody watching our live stream tonight. I want to thank Mike for joining us tonight. It's been a really fun chat. I appreciate everybody joining. Make sure to go on and click the thumbs up button here whenever y'all check out, and make sure to check out Mike's channel if you haven't already. I know a lot of people know who Mike is, so make sure to check him out if you don't know. But other than that, thank you all for watching. Thank you, Mike, very much for joining us tonight, spending time, and we will see everybody later.
Appreciate it, man. Had a great time. Appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone.